Two minutes and 29.9 seconds. That was all the time it took for MonStahLer to finish Path of Pain, Hollow Knight's hardest platforming challenge. In case you don't know, MonStahLer was the king of Hollow Knight speedrunning. Since the game's release, he achieved over 60 world records, many of which were in the game's most competitive categories. In 112% all Pantheon bosses, he even achieved a personal best over 10 minutes ahead of second place. It was one of the most dominant world records ever set in the game. So when he said perfect after finishing his run, it was a big deal. While everyone knew the run would get beat eventually, no one expected it would today stand nearly 30 seconds behind the world record. In the years following his run, the speedrunning community drastically changed. Players mastered the Path of Pain speedrun to a level unseen in other Hollow Knight categories, sinking thousands of hours into a challenge lasting only minutes. Over time, Path of Pain became the most difficult, punishing, and fastest Hollow Knight speedrun without question. In this video, I'll tell you the stories of these players. I'll detail the barriers broken, the rivalries, the discoveries, the awe-inspiring achievements, and the gut-wrenching losses. This is the world record history of Path of Pain speedruns. But before we talk about MonStahLer's world record, I want to tell you about the world's first Goomba simulator. WunderlingDX is a non-stop puzzle platformer where you play as a Goomba who runs on its own. The game forces you to race against the clock, forcing you to collect flowers around each level to replenish your constantly depleting energy bar. Each level offers its own challenges and puzzles, with collectible items and rewards scattered throughout. And despite its appearances, it actually does get pretty challenging, especially if you're trying to 100% the game. WunderlingDX is a hidden gem with cute artwork, satisfying movement, and great level design. Honestly, this game deserves far more attention than it's received. If you want to give it a shot, the game is available on Steam for PC and on Nintendo Switch. Click the link below to check out WunderlingDX. But with that, let's get back to the video. Path of Pain is an area comprised of 4 rooms, which you'll become familiar with as we look through each player's run. Before we start, however, something important to note is that in Hollow Knight, moving hazards, such as saw blades and spears, function on a cycle beginning when the player enters the room. This means that all the movement in a room leading up to these hazards determines where they'll be when the player reaches them. Because of this, Path of Pain speedrun strategies allow almost no room for major mistakes. Mistakes of any kind can throw off a player's movement through the entire rest of the room. MonStahLer's run starts with a crystal dash into the first room, then rapidly climbing while evading saw blades. Reaching the thorn-filled section of wing molds, he performed a precise dash, making use of an intentional shortcut, then descended past the large saw blade. Afterward, to increase the speed of his fall, he performed a glitch called an inventory drop. Inventory dropping is as simple as opening the inventory while midair. It's a trick that removes the player's fall speed cap, allowing them to fall significantly faster. It also cancels the landing stun normally caused by falling a far distance. Following this, MonStahLer crystal dashed to the left and made his ascent to the second room. Monsta made quick work of the first half of room 2. The earlier sections of the room don't see much optimization because no matter how fast the player is, this saw blade at the halfway mark will block their path. Monsta pogoed his way through the section filled with stationary saw blades and reached the final part of room 2. In this section, most players climbed the left wall and crystal dashed off the top, but MonStahLer knew the saw blade cycle well enough to simply dash through its path and then proceed underneath. Next, Monsta crystal dashed into the third room. By canceling it at a specific timing and pogoing off the saw blade, he was able to get just enough height to skip straight to the upper wall. He also skipped the left section of the climb by performing a second precise pogo on another moving saw blade. But when Monsta reached the upper section, he did the unexpected. He crystal dashed from the highest part of the wall, double jumped, and used Abyss Shriek to stall himself in the air. As he did, a saw blade on his right snuck just far enough down for him to pogo off of, allowing him to skip a portion of the upper room. He proceeded through the tunnel of saw blades and thorns on his left and entered the fourth and final room. At the start, he used a precise crystal dash off the left wall. Too high and he would hit the ceiling, ending the crystal dash. Too low and he would clip the thorns ahead. After, he double jumped into and slowly slid down the next wall. The slight pause enabled him to navigate the saw blades for the rest of the room without stopping even once. He inventory dropped to the 2 King's Molds defending the exit, using a strategy of slashing and casting Fluke Nest twice on each. On the right King's Mold, he intentionally damage tanked rather than avoiding the hit. He crystal dashed through the gate and started the final cutscene. And with that, MonStahLer earned the world's first Path of Pain world record. Monsta's personal best was ahead of its time. It went uncontested for nearly a whole year. But in that year, the Hollow Knight speedrunning community was changing. Players were becoming more and more skilled at the game. In late 2018, a player by the name of DLKurosh began doing runs. Kurosh had earned solid times in a few categories, so everyone knew he had the experience to compete. But no one expected him to beat MonStahLer's time by 13 seconds. One of Kurosh's biggest optimizations was his use of the Sharp Shadow charm. Sharp Shadow grants the player's Shade Cloak damage and 39% more distance on each dash. This meant that Kurosh and future players had to map out where to use each and every Shade Cloak dash in the run to maximize the benefit from the charm. Kurosh's first 2 rooms were similar to Monsta's, but Sharp Shadow is a double-edged sword. While it generally saved time, when Kurosh inventory dropped onto the statue, for example, he had to move left for just a brief moment, as the extra dash distance would have otherwise sent him into the thorns. Similarly, in the second room, Kurosh was forced to intentionally waste his Shade Cloak, as this spot didn't have enough space to accommodate a Sharp Shadow dash. Kurosh's movement was crisp. When he touched a wall to regain his dash and double jump, he would instantly tap away to end the wall cling state and begin falling slightly sooner. After performing a pogo, Kurosh would also tap in the opposite direction to cancel the nail swing animation. Because the player can't double jump while the nail animation is active, this allowed him to double jump slightly sooner. By the end of the second room, he was already 2.74 seconds ahead of MonStahLer's world record. In the third room, Kurosh didn't use Monsta's Crystal Dash in the upper section. Despite how creative the movement was, it actually lost time. But Kurosh's biggest time save was in the fourth room. He developed a new movement strategy for the entire room, saving a full 6 seconds. It started with dashing through the spears as they retracted into the thorns. With this setup, he was able to perform far more dashes throughout the room. By the end, his movement cycle enabled him to complete the most difficult section in the room without pausing for even a frame. This strategy became the standard for Path of Pain in the years to follow, and it allowed Kurosh to achieve a new world record of 2 minutes and 17.09 seconds. This time save symbolized how much more competitive the speedrunning community had become over the course of 2018. But MonStahLer had improved more than anyone, and he was about to prove it. In early 2019, after performing one of the biggest sweeps of the Hollow Knight leaderboards ever, MonStahLer made his return to Path of Pain. In June, he adopted many of Kurosh's strategies, but also sprinkled in a few new ones of his own. In the first room, for example, MonStahLer implemented a pogo instant dash on the wing mold leading to the thorn shortcut. This was much harder to execute because being so close to the wing mold meant risking getting hit, but it meant he didn't have to wait after the pogo to fall back down. Because of the time save, he reached the vertical saw blade while it was still at the bottom. It seemed like it would block his progress, but he found that with extremely precise positioning, he could actually squeeze perfectly between the two saw blades. After, he cut his crystal dash past the statue short, double jumping to begin moving upward slightly early. In the first room alone, MonStahLer saved 1.62 seconds. In the final section of Room 2, MonStahLer was also able to squeeze in an extra dash, pogoing off the bottom left saw blade, the center saw blades, and the top saw blade as it moved to the right, saving 1.16 seconds. Similarly, he discovered faster movement for the upper section of Room 3. He double jumped up to the same wing mold as Kurosh, but rather than pogoing it and double jumping to the next one, he pogoed it and immediately dashed to the moving saw blade. The additional dash saved 0.65 seconds for the room, but he actually had one more trick up his sleeve. After killing the left King's mold, he waited slightly before dashing to the right. He was able to dash straight through the enemy, meaning he dealt damage to it and suffered no freeze frames from damage tanking. Overall, MonStahLer saved 3.71 seconds on Kurosh's world record, ending with a time of 2 minutes and 13.38 seconds. MonStah took the world record back, but it would be his last run in the category. Following this, he focused on full game categories and the Pantheons. His achievements, however, would continue to inspire so many others to try the category themselves. But what came next was something few expected, a contender who opted not to use the most important charm in the run. The charm was Dash Master, which reduces the cooldown of the dash from 0.6 to 0.4 seconds. Ironically, many speedrunners despised using it, as its awkward down dash mechanic often sent them face first into the nearest saw blade. For a personal challenge, Axelsson wanted to achieve the world record without using the charm. It was definitely doable for him. He was a player who arguably had the best understanding of the game's movement out of anyone. Axe discovered several time saves for the run. It started with how he navigated around the first vertical saw blade. Axe pogoed the saw blade and moved to the right wall, performing 3 wall jumps above it. Previously, players performed a double jump here, but double jumps in Hollow Knight have a delayed activation, meaning you fall for a brief moment before the double jump actually activates. This means that wall jumps are slightly faster to perform than double jumps. But in the run, when Axe reached the statue, he made a mistake, accidentally canceling the inventory drop too soon. As a result, he exited the room a third of a second behind the world record. Throughout the second room, however, he kept pace with MonStah, entering the third room without bleeding any more time. Axe used a different strategy for the Thorn Tunnel at the end of Room 3. Similar to MonStah's pogo instant dash off the wing mold in Room 1, Axe used a strategy of waiting until he had fell far enough down that he could pogo the saw blade and then instantly dash. This was risky because he had to fall very close to the saw blade before performing the pogo, but it saved a significant amount of time. Suddenly, Axe was entering the final room tied with the world record to the frame. Axe didn't have Dashmaster, so theoretically he should have lost time in the 4th room, but he still managed to pull off Kurosh's 4th room movement. Up to the King's Molds, his 4th room was flawless. It was down to the wire. Axe charged his Crystal Dash, but he ended it just a moment too soon, meaning he had to walk to begin the final cutscene. His time to beat was 2 minutes and 13.38 seconds. After 8 months, a new world record had finally been set, beating MonStahLer's personal best by 0.2 seconds. Axe accomplished his goal of obtaining the world record without Dashmaster, but while he was grinding these runs, a player who almost no one knew was climbing the leaderboard. Something many don't know is that Hollow Knight actually has a significant following in China. Due to censorship laws, however, Chinese players can't access Discord and Google, making communication with the English-speaking community a significant challenge. And that isn't even taking into account the language barrier itself. As a result, few Chinese players ever attempted to learn the speedruns which were popular amongst the English-speaking crowd. Stool was a player who didn't let that get in his way. His story started in November of 2019 when he published his first Path of Pain run on Bilibili with a time of 2 minutes and 21 seconds. He was 4th place, just seconds behind MonStahLer, Axe, and Kurosh. In December 2019, a month later, he improved his personal best to a time of 2 minutes and 16 seconds, knocking Kurosh out of the top 3. And on January 31st, Stool posted a 2 minute and 13 second run, just a fraction of a second behind the world record. Stool was a player with minimal speedrunning experience. What separated him from the others was his dedication to the run. At this point, Stool had already spent months on the category. In February 2020, 1 month after Axe2U's world record, Stool posted a new personal best. It was the world's first 2 minute and 12 second run, and there was something subtle about the run which made it stand out. Other players generally save time by implementing new strategies into their runs, but Stool hardly used anything new at all. He saved 1/3 of a second in each of the first 3 rooms just by executing the movement strategies that everyone else already used faster than they did. With this run, Stool proved his insane skill at the category, and he held the world record for months. But on June 26, 2020, a huge discovery was made. In Hollow Knight, there are spots where ground hitboxes actually peak above the hitboxes of the thorns, meaning the player can find extremely precise spots to land inside the thorns. One of these spots was discovered, which seemed intriguing. It was in room 3, and it was quickly confirmed possible to pogo the saw blade and double jump all the way up to the thorns, allowing the player to skip the entire right section of the 3rd room. It saved approximately 3 seconds. It was the biggest skip ever found in Path of Pain speedrunning. We called it Thorn Skip. The problem was that it's insanely difficult to pull off. It was more precise than any other trick used in Hollow Knight speedrunning. But unbeknownst to them, as the English-speaking community celebrated the discovery, Stool revealed he had independently discovered the skip months earlier, and he knew the world record could be improved by seconds if someone could pull it off in a run. But no one was volunteering to try. Months passed and nothing happened. But on October 14th, 2020, Stool posted a new personal best. 2 minutes and 9.89 seconds. In the run, Stool completed the first 2 rooms almost flawlessly, tying his personal best to the 10th of a second. And when he reached the 3rd room, Stool pogoed the saw blade, dashed, and landed successfully in the thorns. He was finishing a run with Thorn Skip, a feat which would change the category forever. Unfortunately, Stool's mistake cost him half a second, and his shakiness continued into the 4th room where he lost another quarter of a second. But the run was still more than enough to break a huge barrier. Stool achieved the world's first sub-210 Path of Pain run, and completed the first run ever using Thorn Skip. Anyone who wanted the world record from this point on had no choice but to perform it as well. With his run, Stool brought Path of Pain speedrunning to another level. When Thorn Skip was first discovered, most speedrunners were hesitant to give it a shot. After all, imagine spending hours doing runs just to have them all end in the exact same spot. But once players saw Stool was able to pull it off, it actually began to have the opposite effect. A new hollowknight speedrunner named Kalasky was the first to step forward. 2 months after Stool's world record, on December 7th, 2020, Kalasky made his first submission for Path of Pain. It was a 2-minute and 9.56 second run. He silently grinded nearly 10,000 attempts to complete the run. It was unfortunately lost to a copyright strike, and it was never re-uploaded because just 2 days later, Stool fired back. On December 9th, 2020, Stool did more than just take the world record back. He broke another second barrier, completing the world's first 2-minute and 8-second run. As was customary with Stool, the time save was primarily due to better execution. He also saved time, as expected, avoiding the wing mold in Room 3. In the first half of Room 1, however, he did use a new strategy. Before the Thorn shortcut, Stool pogoed the first wing mold as early as possible, then double jumped left and dashed straight into the Thorn tunnel, skipping pogoing the second wing mold completely. This strategy was about as fast as before, but was slightly easier for players to perform. After Stool's run, Kalasky took a short break through the holiday season of 2020. Up to this point, Path of Pain only saw short bursts of activity, but in 2021, twice as many Path of Pain world records were set as in all the previous years combined. And it began with a flurry of world records set by Kalasky. Kalasky's playstyle and movement strats were inspired by Axe more than anyone else. This was because Cal was the only other top player to have similarly opted not to use Dashmaster. He consistently lost approximately 1/5 of a second in Room 2, but Cal knew what he was doing. He would regularly save around 1/4 of a second over Stool in the first room alone. It was because if Cal's first room wasn't absolutely perfect, he would reset, sometimes performing up to 100 attempts before even reaching the second room. Cal's other strength was his Room 3. It was insanely consistent. In 3 of his 4 submitted times, the time he achieved in his third room was 20.7 seconds. He did this by implementing a movement strategy discovered nearly a full year earlier by Axe. Cal was able to leverage these strengths to great success, attaining 3 world records in a row, achieving a time of 2 minutes and 8.28 seconds. But Cal wanted to finally break a second barrier and achieve the world's first 2-minute and 7-second time. At this point, he had already performed nearly 15,000 attempts and was still 1/3 of a second away. He needed something more to be able to pull it off. And as luck would have it, a new discovery was in the process of being made. Players were previously convinced they had been running Path of Pain on the optimal patch. patch 1221, but the developers had released up to patch 1432. This patch removed inventory dropping, which was a significant time loss, but there was another difference. On 1432, the King's molds at the end had significantly less health, enabling a new quick kill strat. Players could Descending Dark as far left as possible, and it would just barely hit the left King's mold with the spell's Shockwave. They would then swing at and Sharp Shadow dash through the King's mold on the right, Shade Souling left 3 times to kill them both at the same time. Cal started a run on the new patch to test whether it saved time. He was immediately on a great pace. Despite not being able to inventory drop, he only lost 1/3 of a second in Room 1 and even saved time in Room 2. Room 3, however, started off awkwardly. Cal used a new strat of pogoing the soul statue rather than the saw blade, but hesitated just slightly before doing so. Somehow, Cal still managed to climb quickly enough to reach the saw blade in time to perform Thorn Skip. He ended the 3rd room with a time of 20.7 seconds. Cal was only 0.2 seconds behind his personal best, with potential time save at the end of room 4. He reached the King's molds with nearly flawless movement and dove into the arena, pulling off the quick kill strategy perfectly. He crystal dashed to the right and finished the run, but was it enough to make up for entering the room behind on time? Cal was looking for the sub 2 minute and 8 second run.
Oh my god! 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 Finally did it!
After months of grinding and nearly 15,000 attempts, Cal broke his first second barrier. As a result, patch 1432 became the new standard for Path of Pain speedruns. Content with his achievements, Cal moved on to other speedrunning categories, and with Stool and Kalasky out of the picture, a new player began their rise to the top. Two weeks before Kalasky's run, on January 14th, 2021, a player named Schy posted a Path of Pain personal best of 2 minutes and 22 seconds. It was their first submitted speedrun ever. But what was impressive about this run was that Schy had already begun using top-level strategies, such as Kurosh's 4th room movement cycle. On February 3rd, Schy posted another personal best, this time a 2 minute and 13 second run using Thorn Skip. It was a trick that only 2 players had ever pulled off in a run. Schy practiced the room for 8 hours before pulling it off even a single time, and continued for dozens more hours before becoming consistent enough to use it in runs. Schy was set on becoming a top Path of Pain speedrunner. Throughout February, Schy rapidly improved, setting new personal bests on February 8th with a 2:12 and on February 12th with a 2 minute and 8 second run. In just a month, Schy was already just 1 second behind the world record. But Schy was a player who wasn't just focused on execution. Schy developed and implemented more new strategies for the run than anyone else. For example, in the second room at the statue, Schy found it was marginally faster if you performed a precise dash along the ground, avoiding a needless double jump by performing a grounded jump instead. Schy also found a time save in the top section of room 2. Previously, players would start their dash from far left so that as it ended, they were in position to pogo the bottom left saw blade. Schy discovered that you could instead start moving right as soon as possible and pogo the bottom left saw blade slightly later instead. Naturally, this saved a significant amount of time. Schy found an even bigger time save at the end of the 3rd room. Before this, players would pogo above these wing molds to avoid them. Schy instead delayed their dash slightly to intentionally expend their Shade Cloak after the first wing mold. This meant that Shade Cloak would refresh and get used here, and then refresh again at the perfect time to dash directly through the final wing mold in the section. For those who were paying attention, it was no surprise when Schy set a new world record on February 26th. It was with a time of 2 minutes and 7.59 seconds. 0.16 seconds faster than Kalasky's time. What was a surprise was that just 4 days later, Schy was about to do it again. In the 4-day time span, Schy had already begun using a new strategy. It was called a Cyclone Drop. Using Cyclone Slash during a drop temporarily uncaps the player's fall speed, similar to inventory dropping. However, it's rarely optimal to use because it only uncaps fall speed for a small amount of time. But this made it perfect for the statue drop in Room 1, where the stun from Descending Dark wasted too much time. Despite its simplicity, the strategy saved half a second. Because of this, Schy was able to find a pace half a second ahead of world record entering Room 3. And while Kalasky's 20.7 second third room was incredible for its time, Schy's third room clocked in at 20.34 seconds, over a third of a second faster than Cal. It was a significantly faster time than what anyone had pulled off before. Schy was on pace for a new world record, but when they went to Shade Soul the King's Mold at the end, they mistimed their second input, pressing it too early and losing a significant amount of time. The time to beat was 2 minutes and 7.59 seconds. Despite the mistake, Schy broke their first second barrier, achieving the world's first 2 minute and 6 second Path of Pain speedrun. Breaking a second barrier in this category was a huge achievement, something Kalasky performed nearly 15,000 attempts to pull off. But Schy wasn't content with just that. Just a few days later, after having set 2 world records in a row, Schy discovered a new cycle for Room 4, replacing DLKurosh's cycle that had been used for over 2 years. Previously, players would pogo dash once off the center spear, and then once on the vertical saw blade after. With the new cycle, Schy squeezed in an extra pogo dash off the right spear as well. Schy would then wait for Shadecloak to refresh before dashing off this saw blade. With this movement, Schy reached the final saw blade significantly sooner, and just as they did, Shadecloak refreshed. This saw blade would then return, following right behind the player, allowing them to rapidly pogo dash off of it 3 times in a row. This was Schy's new 4th room cycle. It was the biggest Path of Pain discovery since Thorn Skip. The cycle wasn't easy to pull off either, but just 5 days after the previous world record, Schy entered Room 4, tied with their personal best, and pulled off the new movement cycle successfully. Everyone knew it would be a new world record, but would it be the world's first 2 minute and 5 second run?
Dude, congratulations, holy shit.
In the span of 1 week, Schy broke not just 1, but 2 second barriers. It was the craziest string of world records yet. Players named the 4th room movement cycle the Shycle. Schy had made so many new discoveries and pushed the world record down faster than anyone could have ever expected. Following this, for the first time in 2021, there was a lull in the action, but this only gave a new player the time they needed to catch up. Shortly after Schy's world records, a player named VLS began doing runs. In his first run, he took 11 hits of unintentional damage, taking over 4 minutes to finish. The video was titled "Trying to Speedrun Path of Pain, but I'm not a Path of Pain speedrunner." Over the next week, he would rapidly improve, completing his first hitless run with a time of 2 minutes and 39 seconds on April 5th. He took a short break before continuing in May, returning with another streak of personal bests. By June, he had improved to a time of 2 minutes and 13 seconds. On June 22nd, VLS finished his first run with Thorn Skip, achieving a 2 minute and 9.12 second run. He started taking things more seriously than before. 6 days later, VLS posted a new strategy for Room 2, saving approximately half of a second. It was performed by dashing from slightly farther left, allowing him to pogo the bottom left saw blade immediately after the dash. VLS would then pogo the center saw blades on the left, and then pogo the center saw blades again on the right. This enabled him to squeeze in an additional dash into the room. By the end of June, VLS narrowly took second place from Kalasky with a time of 2 minutes and 7.51 seconds, but he was still 2 seconds behind Schy. On July 13th, VLS started another run. His individual room times had become so fast that if the stars aligned, he was capable of skipping the 2 minute and 6 second run and taking the world record in one swoop. His room 1 was nearly identical to Schy's, but in the second room, he pulled off his new strat, leaping ahead of the world record by almost half a second. After VLS landed Thorn Skip, the pressure was on. There were signs, however, that the pressure was getting to him. Minor pauses in his movement for safety. As he finished the room, he golded his split, but even though it was a gold, VLS lost 0.4 seconds to Schy. Going into room 4, they were tied with times of 1 minute and 21.2 seconds. VLS couldn't bleed any more time. In room 4, at the last moment, VLS second-guessed himself. With just a single button press, he missed the cycle and instantly ended his chance of getting the world record. But it was still possible to earn a personal best. He dove to the King's Molds, dashed to the right, and cast only 2 Shade Souls. He didn't start the run with enough soul to cast 3. His run ended a quarter of a second behind his personal best. But after 1,500 more attempts, VLS earned the 2 minute and 6 second time. In the run, there was still some shakiness after he landed Thorn Skip, with a delayed jump into room 4 and missing the triple pogo dash at the end of the cycle. But apart from these mistakes, the run was almost perfect. VLS was only a second away from earning the world record, but the only way he could pull it off is by overcoming his 3rd and 4th room nerves. 6,000 attempts later, he entered room 3, outpacing his best time by 0.07 seconds. It was a huge opportunity. He had a full half-second lead on Schy, pulling off Thorn Skip successfully, but he bled time to Schy's 3rd room, and as he entered the 4th room, he was less than 1/10 of a second ahead. Once again, there was no room for mistakes. As he finished the 4th room, it was so close that no one knew if he'd pulled it off. The time to beat was 2 minutes and 5.61 seconds.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
It was a new world record by less than 2 frames. After 4 months of hard work, VLS dethroned Schy's personal best on July 27th. VLS painstakingly went from a 4-minute time, being hesitant to even call himself a speedrunner, to being the fastest Path of Pain speedrunner in the world, cementing himself as one of the best speedrunners of the game. Schy immediately returned to take the record back. Over the next week and a half, Schy performed thousands of attempts. It didn't take them long to get back in the swing of things. On August 4th, Schy started off a run on a great pace, ending the first room with a time of 27.11 seconds. Schy's movement in the second room was a mix of their previous movement and VLS's new movement. It was slightly faster than before, but not quite as fast as VLS. But as Schy entered the 3rd room, it was their time to shine. Schy pulled off Thorn Skip and approached the tunnel to exit the room. But at the end of the tunnel, Schy pogoed too early, bonking into the ceiling without gaining any height. Schy had no choice but to pogo the final wing mold to enter the 4th room. Schy was a quarter of a second behind. In order to pull it off, Schy would need better than a 44.22 second 4th room, but Schy absolutely flew through room 4, completing it nearly flawlessly. There was no doubt that it beat VLS's room 4 time, but was it enough to get the world record back? The time to beat was 2 minutes and 5.58 seconds. Schy's run resulted in the only frame tie to the 100th of a second in the history of all Hollow Knight speedrunning. As a result, Schy went back to the drawing boards. In room 2 after the statue, Schy started using a new wall jump on the right rather than 2 wall jumps and a double jump. It put them in the perfect spot to use 4 dashes in quick succession. Schy also fully implemented VLS's movement in the final part of the room. Finally, and most importantly, Schy began using the turnaround thorn skip. It was an even more difficult version of the skip. It involved double jumping first and dashing almost directly onto the thorns. Immediately after the dash, the player would turn around just a moment before landing and dash twice instantly after. It saved about 1/3 of a second, but it was an absurdly difficult skip to pull off in a run. In late August, Schy started a run. They finished the first room with an excellent time of 27.02 seconds. And thanks to their movement optimizations in room 2, Schy finished it with a 32.8 second time. This was the fastest pace entering room 3 ever achieved by a player. And when they reached it, they pulled off the turnaround thorn skip. They finished room 3 1.48 seconds ahead of the world record. The run was on pace to break 2-second barriers at once, skipping the 2-minute and 4-second run to earn the world's first 2-minute and 3-second world record. But Schy was just a few pixels too low, and the pace was gone in an instant. After the run, Schy revealed they were only able to complete the turnaround thorn skip twice in a run ever, out of approximately 1,000 runs that had reached the skip. It was a success rate of 0.2% from the player with the best room 3 in the world. Schy took a step back from attempts, and in their place, a familiar face returned. Stool was making his return to the category. It was October 2021, a couple months after Schy tied VLS's run to the frame. Stool saw all the new strategies that had been developed since then and realized the record was ripe for the taking. His personal best was a time of 2 minutes and 8.84 seconds set in December 2020, over 3 seconds away from the current world record. But Stool's strength as a player was his execution, and if he could master the strategies that others had found, the world record would be his. On October 5th, Stool posted a run. His attempts counter was still under 1,000, but he was pulling off all the new movement successfully. Even in the first room, Stool saved time without any significant differences in strategy. It was all in the smallest of details, saving milliseconds wherever possible. Stool's first room was on the same level as Cal's, but he used all of the new time saves. He exited the room a full 1/3 of a second ahead of the world record, but he wouldn't slow down in room 2. VLS's room 2 was the fastest ever done in a world record by 1/4 of a second, but Stool finished the room even faster with a sub 33 second time. As Stool entered room 3, he was tied with Schy's insane pace from before to the frame. Stool reached thorn skip and pulled it off successfully, reaching the King's molds at the end of room 4 shortly after. This was the only moment where Stool showed any sloppiness. His fireballs were just slightly too late, and he lost a bit of time to the King's molds. Regardless, with the run, Stool finally made his return to the top of the Path of Pain leaderboards. It was the world's first 2-minute and 4-second run, but Stool knew that he was capable of even better. Just 3 days later, on October 8th, Stool posted another personal best. His run used the same strategies as before, but in every room, he saved time. His skill was on another level. In the third room, Stool implemented a wing mold skip that Schy had found, double jumping directly to the leftmost wing mold, saving approximately 1/4 of a second. His room 3 matched Schy's best room 3 in a run to the frame. Stool was on pace to earn the world's first 2-minute and 3-second Path of Pain run ever done, just days after he had already broken a second barrier. But when he went down to the King's molds, he made the same mistake again and lost a few frames. It wasn't clear whether he could pull it off. Stool set a new personal best, a run just frames away from being the world's first 2-minute and 3-second run. Second barrier broken or not, he finished the unbelievable run which Schy had lost before, and he proved that the 2-minute and 3-second run was within reach for a human player. Stool decided to stop there, content with the progress that he'd made. Stool was not an innovator, but with his precise and consistent execution, he once again took the run to another level. At this point in time, Path of Pain had become so optimized that top runners were either veterans of the category, such as Stool, or players who had spent months catching up. Yet just 2 days after Stool set the world record, a new player took it from him. Yihou was a Chinese player who burst onto the Hollow Knight scene. Known for setting a new any % no major glitches current patch world record earlier in 2021. But Yihou was now running Path of Pain as he posted a new time of 2 minutes and 3.59 seconds, the world's first 2-minute and 3-second run. Yihou's room times looked like this. He wasn't able to match Stool's room 1, but in room 2, he saved nearly half a second. This was because Yihou optimized the climb to the upper section of room 2. The movement was incredibly crisp. He would dash just pixels underneath the thorns, proceeding upward with a double jump, pogo, and 3 wall jumps. This cut out 2 unnecessary double jumps, and because it was faster, it allowed the player to begin moving right in the next section even earlier. Yihou exited the room 0.29 seconds ahead of the world record and maintained the lead through room 3. In room 4, however, Yihou saved even more time. He pulled off the Scheikel and Kingsmold quick kill without any time loss. It was a run that seemed nearly flawless, but one player in particular would be inspired to beat it. Schy had already cemented themselves as one of the best Path of Pain speedrunners of all time. Even though Schy was in 3rd place at this point, they had innovated and contributed so much to the run. More than anyone else, Schy paved the way for the community's progress in 2021. And to discover what strategies to learn next, they looked to the Path of Pain tasks. Path of Pain has sections which are highly cycle dependent. Room 1, however, was the least cycle dependent of all. But the Path of Pain tasks actually hit a specific cycle involving the large vertical saw blade. The task reached it so quickly that it could just barely squeeze to the left by Sharp Shadow down dashing along the wall. After performing the down dash, the task was far enough left that it could bypass the next section without having to break its fall pogoing the saw blade. It saved about 1/3 of a second. The problem was that no player had ever pulled it off in a run. It required players to be incredibly fast in the first part of the room to reach the saw blade in time. If they were too slow, the saw blade would be too far down and the player wouldn't have enough room to perform the down dash. But while others were performing world record attempts, Schy was practicing the TAS Room 1 cycle. On October 18th, just 6 days after Yihou's run, Schy posted a run of their own. In it, Schy's best time for Room 1 was visible on LiveSplit, 26.40 seconds. It was a time significantly faster than anything before, and sure enough, when Schy reached the saw blade, they were fast enough to pull off the task cycle. Schy exited Room 1 with a time of 26.52, 0.31 seconds ahead of Yihou's world record. In Room 2, Schy used Yihou's new movement strategies, but wasn't quite as clean as he was, losing 0.13 seconds. But Schy was the master of Room 3. While they didn't go for the turnaround thorn skip, they didn't need it. With clean execution throughout the room, Schy brought their lead back to 0.31 seconds once again. In the 4th room, Schy used a different version of the Scheikel, which was roughly the same speed. But as Schy faced the King's Molds, they made an unfortunate mistake. Schy again performed the fireball input slightly too early. It wasn't clear whether the world record was still possible. The time to beat was 2 minutes and 3.59 seconds. Schy pulled it off. beating Yihou's time by 0.17 seconds. It took less than a week, but the very next day, Yihou began streaming attempts to take the world record back, and he was already pulling off the TAS Room 1 cycle. But even though he could pull it off occasionally, the cycle was insanely hard. His attempts climbed by the thousands as the weeks passed. On November 3rd, Yihou pulled off the TAS Room 1 cycle successfully and entered the 4th room 0.16 seconds ahead of the world record. With a flawless room, the 2 minute and 2 second time was just barely doable. Yihou reached the King's Molds and performed the quick kill without any significant time loss. Everyone knew it was a new world record, but would it break the second barrier? It wasn't the 2 minute and 2 second run, but it was a huge world record. His only significant time loss was losing 0.19 seconds to Schy's Room 3. If Schy wanted to take the world record back, they had some catching up to do. Schy began labbing the entire level to try and close the gap, searching for potential time saves anywhere. Soon enough, Schy made a new discovery. Instead of dashing prior to performing the thorn skip, Schy squeezed in another pogo on the saw blade to double jump straight up to the thorns. Because they didn't dash before the skip, they didn't have to wait for Sharp Shadow to refresh. It saved approximately a quarter of a second. Schy attempted runs for weeks without much luck, but on November 22nd, Schy finally had an opportunity. If they could take the world record, they might also be able to claim the world's first 2 minute and 2 second run. Schy reached Room 3 0.19 seconds behind the world record, but pulled off their new movement, saving 0.37 seconds on Yihou's run. Yihou's Room 4 times, however, were typically slightly faster than Schy's, so it was going to be close, but Schy's Room 4 was flawless, finishing the room with the fastest time ever achieved in a world record at 44.10 seconds. Schy took the world record back with a time of 2 minutes and 2.89 seconds. In case it wasn't already obvious, these players were going to compete for the world record. When Yihou returned, rather than simply copying the new Room 3 strategy, he actually improved it. He noticed that when Schy performed the skip, they double jumped straight to the left wing mold as normal and had to pause to avoid dashing into the leftmost vertical saw blade. Instead of doing that, Yihou double jumped and paused at the rightmost wing mold. Pausing there allowed Sharp Shadow to refresh at the perfect moment to allow one extra Sharp Shadow dash in the room. It saved about a third of a second. Just 2 days later, Yihou had a run on pace to take the world record back. Because of his new movement, his third room was a gold split, and over half a second ahead of Schy's world record, and he flew through Room 4, poised to end the run with a low 2 minute and 2 second time.
no! 挺早了。
Despite the time loss, on December 24th, 2021, Yihou earned a new world record by 0.22 seconds. But even though his skill and precision earned himself a spot at the top of the leaderboards, the path that brought him there was paved by so many others. And in early February 2022, Schy was going to prove it. On February 2nd, 2022, Schy revealed they had implemented another strategy they'd found from the TAS. This time, it was a strategy in Room 3, a strat which Schy said took 3,000 attempts to pull off just once. It was a combination of the new movement Yihou found, along with an additional pogo dash, but this time it was on a saw blade which was above the player. Just days later, Schy posted a run. It entered Room 3 using the same movement and strats as before, but they managed to squeeze a small amount of time save on their personal best. In Room 3, they pulled off the new TAS movement. Suddenly, Schy was 0.20 seconds ahead of Yihou's world record. With Yihou's mistake at the end of Room 4, Schy had the potential to save even more time in the final room. After an excellent room 4, Schy had pulled it off, but they weren't sure by how much. The time to beat was 2 minutes and 2.67 seconds.
Yes! I told you, the next time we're gonna get to the last room, I'm gonna get the fucking world record, dude.
Schy pulled it off, achieving an unbelievable time of 2 minutes and 2.28 seconds. The 2 minute and 1 second time felt so close, yet so far. It was a milestone representing an almost completely perfect run with the current strategies. Even combining the best room times achieved out of every world record up to this point, the time was 2 minutes and 1.96 seconds, giving only a few frames of wiggle room to achieve the sub 2 minute and 2 second run. It seemed almost impossible for a player to pull it off, but Yihou wouldn't let that get in his way. 2 weeks after Schy's run, on February 16th, 2022, Yihou achieved a new personal best. It was a time of 2 minutes and 1.90 seconds, the world's first 2 minute and 1 second time. In the run, Yihou's strategy was identical to Schy's in their previous world record, but his times in Room 2 and Room 4 were unbelievable. Through precise execution alone, Yihou incredibly saved 0.15 seconds in Room 2 and 0.26 seconds in Room 4. With this run, Yihou cemented himself as the most technically skilled Path of Pain speedrunner without question. And as of the creation of this video, Yihou's run was the last world record achieved in the category. After what happened throughout 2021 and early 2022, who knows what's in store for the speedrun in the future? Although the world record's now more optimized than ever before, with Path of Pain, these players have proved the sky's the limit. There are still time saves so incredibly difficult that players are yet to introduce them into the run. Which of these strategies will be used? Who will be the next to get the world record? And will the 2 minute and 1 second barrier ever be broken? If you want to keep up to date, I've posted links to subscribe to the players below. In conclusion, I'd like to sincerely thank all of them for their permission to make this video and use their footage. I'd also like to shout out hollowknight modders whose work enabled players to efficiently practice and perform runs. Lastly, it's important to say that speedrunning is more than just its world record holders. Shoutouts to everyone in the speedrunning community who makes it as exciting and fun as it is today. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video and that you have a wonderful day.